Welcome. My name is Barry Groves, and I'm president of WASC, the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, and welcome to Sacramento office of ACSA. Thank you for ACSA for allowing us to use your facility. Today we have a 1-hour webinar working towards coherence, aligning WASC, SPSA, and LCAP. We have two panels. One panel of experts in the area representing our organizations, and then we have people from the sites who will come. So there'll be two of those people. Just as a reminder, this will also be saved online. So in 48 hours, you can either go to the ACSA website or the WASC website, and you will see the recording of this. Please ask questions during the webinar. We hope to answer them. Last year we did a webinar similar to this, and we answered the questions even if we didn't have time online. We answered them offline. So please do ask questions, and we will get back to you. We'll also be answering some of the questions both online, and the panel at the end will also be answering some of the questions. So we hope that happens. Again, there's going to be two panels, so the first panel will be about a half hour, then they'll go off, and then the next panel of the people from the districts and schools will be here. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first panel. To my left is Mr. Carrick Ashley. He's Deputy Superintendent of the California Department of Education. Right in front of me is Ms. Martha Alvarez, who's an ACSA legislative analyst, works here in the ACSA headquarters in Sacramento. And to my right is Marilyn George, who's the Executive Vice President of WASC. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the hour. Thank you. Oh, I do want to say a few more things, excuse me. Sorry for that. What we're doing today is how ongoing school improvement can best be accomplished if the school plans are aligned with LCAP. And our outline for today is that we're focused on school site and district leadership actions in an informed board, and Marilyn will be talking about that. Carrick will be talking about supporting coherence of SPSA, LCAP, and WASC, and what we've been doing together. And Martha will be talking about the focus on learning, the guiding principles supporting alignment between LCAP and the Schoolwide Action Plan, and also what she's been hearing and has heard out in the field as she goes out from ACSA membership and the ACSA membership. Okay, with that, we're going to try it again. Carrick.
Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Carrick Ashley, Deputy Superintendent at the California Department of Education. It's great to be here this morning, and especially to talk about school plans and local district plans as we try to bring it all together to create that coherence in a system of continuous improvement. I think we're all right now living through a special time in California's education history. I've worked at the California Department of Education for 25 years now, and in the last 4 years, I have never seen a greater agreement, coherence, and direction from leadership starting at the governor's office to the legislature, the State Board of Education, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, our county offices, and our school districts as we try to create an environment in which we want to create a continuous improvement environment, not only at the state level, but the district level, down to the school level. Last week, the governor signed AB 716. That was a bill that was authored by Assemblymember Patrick O'Donnell and sponsored by the state superintendent, Tom Torlakson. It had pretty widespread support, almost complete support by everyone. And what that bill did is to create one coherent planning process that aligns the LCAP with school plans. It becomes effective in January, so between now and January, the Department of Education will be working with stakeholders to create some guidance out to the field on how to create a school plan and to put it within the process for local planning. First, the bill eliminated a lot of obsolete references. As you may recall, the school plan and school site councils were in different parts of the Ed Code. We had a process prior to LCFF in which we had categorical programs. And so as categorical programs grew, there became more bills on how to bring these different categoricals together into a single plan for student achievement, which is where the name came from. But now that we have LCFF, we don't have a system in which there are a lot of categorical programs. It was time to update that bill and to update the school site council requirements and to bring them all into one place. So within the Ed Code now, school planning, school site councils are in one place. For convenience, we actually kept the acronym, SPSA, and simply changed the name from Single Plan for Student Achievement to School Plan for Student Achievement. And what it does primarily is it aligns the requirements of the federal government under ESSA to meet the requirements that we have under our state program. So regardless of what state a school is in, whether it's identified as needing improvement or not, all schools will then use the same process. It's a process in which there's a needs assessment. Use the dashboard to take a look at where your strengths and needs and areas of improvement are, to create some goals based on that information and data, and then support those goals and actions with a budget that makes sense. It also aligns our LCAP, the Local Control and Accountability Plan, with the school plan for student achievement. A couple of other things that the bill did that we think are important was to address some of the struggles that our smaller schools have, our smaller school districts. So if you are in a school district with a single school, or if you are a charter school, you can now use the LCAP process with stakeholders to take the place of the school plan for student achievement. So there does not have to be two documents, but a single document under the LCAP if a school chooses. You can still use both documents if you choose, but for these small single school districts and charter schools, the LCAP and the LCAP process and the stakeholder process to develop that LCAP can be used in place of the school plan. Every state board meeting, we also have multiple waiver requests from small schools, from neighboring schools that want to create a single school site council rather than having multiple school site councils where there's a small population of students, meaning that there's a small number of teachers to get candidates from, small number of parents to get candidates from to create a school site council. So what we did is we took a look at waiver requirements, and we took a look at the waivers that came to the state board, and we created in the bill the requirements that allow single school districts, neighboring schools, schools with small populations that are nearby to automatically be able to create a single school site council without having to come to the state board for a waiver. Lastly, the documents or the documentation related to creating those single plans are also part of AB 716. There are a couple of requirements for the process to create that single plan or that school plan for student achievement. One is a document that talks about coming together as stakeholders, taking a look at the data, seeing where your strengths and weaknesses and areas of improvement are, and then creating from that needs assessment, developing a process for monitoring the plan once it's created. Then the document itself, the school plan itself, has some very simple requirements that are, again, very much connected to the local plan, the local LCAP. So that SPSA document requires goals to be set, just like the LCAP, evidence for strategies, actions, or services, like the LCAP, and then proposed expenditures on how you're going to support those actions and services. As you know, the school plans still have to be approved by the local board. So between the local board and the school district and the local schools, there can be a single coherent planning process. The district can decide which sort of direction it takes, whether the school helps inform the LCAPs or the LCAPs help inform the school plans. It can work either way. It's probably best if it works together at the same time in a single fashion. And then eventually that school plan has to be approved by the local board. And LCFF still requires that the superintendent take a look and ensure that school plans are aligned with the local control accountability plan. So with that, I will take a look and see if we have questions to be answered. I think I've actually used up my initial time, so I'll take a look at the questions, but I think I'll turn it over to Martha.
Great, thank you, Carrick. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in this very important discussion about how do we best align the local planning process in order to support student achievement. As Dr. Groves mentioned, my name is Martha Alvarez, and I work for ACSA as one of the advocates, leading our advocacy work related to school accountability, the school dashboard, the LCAP, and as Carrick mentioned, we were also supporting Assembly Bill 716 that just became law last week, and it will go into effect January 1st of 2019. A couple of observations from ACSA. We have heard from our administrators across the state, both at the school site level and district level, as well as the county office, the importance of better integrating and aligning many of these documents. We have also heard a lot of concern when there's duplication of efforts at the local level, because that takes away your precious time from working with teachers in order to support student achievement and student learning. So we have been working with the Department of Education, providing feedback to the Department of Education as well as the State Board of Education in trying to really elevate the conversation about this coherence and alignment. The Department of Education staff definitely has been a strong partner in ensuring this additional alignment and coherence. And it goes beyond just the LCAP and the single plan, or now the school plan for student achievement. Carrick didn't mention it today, but definitely for those of you who have been paying attention over the last several years, there'll also be the new ESSA federal LCAP addendum. There'll be a new document that CDE definitely made an effort to ensure coherence and alignment with the LCAP. So that's more on the federal requirements with Title I and other funding sources. And then also, how do we look at the school accountability report card and other data metrics that are already captured at the local level to ensure consistency with the LCAP and the dashboard data metrics. So from that perspective, to just take a pause on that note, we have reiterated this area of interest for our members to the Department of Education and State Board of Education, and we look forward to continue to work with CDE and State Board to determine how do we best align those plans moving forward. There's been a lot of progress made to date, and there might be opportunities in the future to continue that work. If any of you, since you're all working at the local level, having to complete this plan and think about how you fit into the entire system of education and supporting kids, we welcome your feedback because you do know what you're having to experience, the different requirements coming from the federal and state level. So do let us know opportunities for that greater alignment if you see those opportunities for improvement. Part of what we appreciate about Assembly Bill 716 regarding the school plan for student achievement and the better coherence with LCAP is thinking about stakeholder engagement. How can we ensure that the local communities are apprised of the changes happening in schools? How can they be brought into the conversation, since both state and federal law requires that stakeholder engagement in part of these local planning processes, so that they understand the data, the underlying metrics that inform how students are doing. And so to that extent that, that there's opportunities to continue to engage your stakeholders it will be very important to build the trust required for them to understand how you're determining your local priorities with their feedback. One other area that I want to underscore is, and Carrick alluded to this beforehand, there's a lot of interest in ensuring, as we talk about closing the achievement gap, how do we look at the data? How do you, as a community of educators and school leaders, look at the data closely, not just from the dashboard, but other data you may have locally to help inform your best practices, your strategies that you pursue, as well as your resource allocation. This is especially really important right now that the state of California will likely be going into sort of a flat funding future budget. And so how do you ensure that looking at the data helps to inform your local goal setting as well as those resources allocation? We are very pleased that as part of the new law change with SB 716, school districts will not have, school sites will not have to do a separate improvement plan, so that in case your school, Title I school is identified for support under federal law, ESSA requirements, that you can just leverage the information you have in your school plan for student achievement in order to use that and leverage that information to convey your story and your action plans to support students. So we're really grateful for that change. So there's no additional requirements on your part. And then the other piece that Carrick mentioned, I also want to give credit to the Department of Education for making sure that if you are a single school, and we have many small districts in California for single school / one district or for charter schools, that there's no additional requirement to go and do a separate LCAP, or a separate school plan for student achievement if you have your LCAP. So how do you leverage those opportunities? And I'll just wrap up my comments by just mentioning there's a lot of interest in Sacramento regarding resource allocation, so thinking about the inputs, how you're spending your money, fiscal transparency. But what we hope that through this alignment process at the local level with all of these plans, that it can help with greater conversations about student outcomes, which really speaks to pupil achievement and the achievement gap that we continue to have in the state of California. So I think changing the dialogue is going to require a concerted effort to continue to focus on student needs. And by looking at your plans very closely, looking at data to inform your plans, we hope that the legislature and other local communities can be focusing about the student outcomes piece, not so much about just where the money's going, but rather how the money's best utilized to support student growth and progress over time. And I think that that's sort of my last comment, which is that continuous improvement idea. The state of California has been developing over the past 2.5 or close to 3 years, a new system of support that both will be focusing on school districts, but also for the Title I schools identified for support under federal law. And so how do we continue to support you in an effort to continue to make progress over time? And again, this is a cyclical cycle, and we understand, you know, that of looking at the data, planning, executing those strategies, and then reassessing those areas of strength as well as your areas or opportunities for improvement. So we at ACSA look forward to hearing your feedback on how we can be a resource to you, how we can help advance good policy that supports students in the state, and we thank you for what you do every day on behalf of kids in California.
So thank you, Martha. Let me just add a couple of things. Again, this is Carrick. We had a couple questions come in on the feed here. One has to do with whether there will be a template. There currently is a template on the CDE website that attempted to align the single plan for student achievement with the LCAP. So that can be used for the time being between now and January. We will be working on guidance and updating that template to make sure that everything in there is aligned with the new bill, AB 716. With the concept that the dashboard will come out in December, the guidance will be available by then. Districts and schools can start using the dashboard and that new template if they choose to start aligning their school process and doing their plans aligned with AB 716. So a new template and guidance will both be coming out. Also got a question on the feed. Just to clarify again, what Martha also said was the LCAP and the single plan for single school districts, districts with only one school, or charter schools, they have to do LCAPs. They do not have to do single plans or now student plans or school plans for student achievement. The LCAP can take the place of those school plans if they choose. There was also a question about alternative schools. As you know, alternative schools did not get a dashboard last year, but in December there will be a dashboard for those alternative schools, and they too can use that dashboard to inform their local plans. Then there was also a question about how the school plan aligns with WASC and what WASC requires. And so as part of our continuous improvement and aligning and coherence, I'm going to turn it over to Marilyn, and maybe she can address that.
Great. Thank you so much, Carrick and Martha. This is a perfect order of conversation because I got very excited as I heard Carrick and Martha talk, because our process connects the dots, if you will. It helps pull it together. It is an ongoing school change, school improvement process that can guide a school in looking at what are the major student learner needs. How do we evaluate what we're doing now? What do we need to modify and change? And our overall basic philosophy is one plan that moves all of us forward as we all own that plan, aligned, of course, with the district LCAP or one in the same, as we just heard. So let's just take a look at a couple visuals to emphasize that. Accreditation is synonymous with ongoing, never-ending school improvement. And as we heard Martha say, we use different language, but the process, which is on a 6-year cycle in California, schools assess, plan, implement, and reassess on an ongoing basis. So you notice the follow-up circle is quite large because essentially a self-study with fellow educators visiting provides insight, but the ongoing emphasis is exactly what we just heard. The school has a plan that will now be totally integrated with the LCAP as we look at what are the major student learner needs, what are we doing to address those, and making what I call in-flight modifications as we look at what's working and what's not working. All a focus on learning. For over 30 years, thanks to input from all the educators in California, the focus on learning accreditation process has been driven by these basic concept questions. How well are our students achieving? Are we at the school doing everything possible to support that? So the process supports what schools need to do, knowing there's flexibility. As we just heard Carrick and Martha talk about small schools that work as committee of a whole on this, to larger districts and systems. So over the years, as we focused on accreditation, guiding principles have emerged, and I want to point those out because they fit nicely with everything we heard. The recent passage of AB 716 and the ongoing commitment to closing the achievement gap. We believe the WASC Focus on Learning process supports a school in looking at how well are students achieving the broader learner outcomes as well as the academic standards, such as, I've never found a school in my 32 years that didn't say we want students to demonstrate greater critical, creative thinking or innovative thinker. How are we doing on that as we implement our academic standards and address basic literacy needs? So the process helps the school continually look at that as they measure high achievement of students in relation to district goals, school-wide learner outcomes, and academic standards. So the Focus on Learning process helps the school look holistically at themselves in light of all the student needs supported by the district. And our belief has always been, as we just heard here, there are multiple ways to assess student learning. Paper and pencil assessments, external, internal assessments, rubrics supporting student work, teacher-student perceptions. So we look at that in the spirit of flexible ways to measure student learning as we evaluate program effectiveness. And what will help, as we just heard the exciting news of really tighter linking everything together based on a data-informed use of multiple types of achievement data and what's happening. Over the years, with input from educators in the field, we have used research-based criteria that help a school look at everything based on multiple types of data. How are we organized to support student learning at the systems level? What are students learning? How are they learning? How assessment is used? And how are we providing all that personal academic support in a culture and environment that nurtures and supports student learning and well-being? So this process helps the coherence as schools look at the so what question. What currently exists and how effective is it? How, on a regular basis, not just once every 6 years, continual, constant, what are we implementing? How's it going? How is it making a difference? Where do we modify? So as we learned here, the school plan is the final product of this self-study look that is used as the roadmap continually with modifications as needed, obviously linked with the LCAP. So the guiding principle that I think particularly is of emphasis today is the final product of any deep look at oneself is the school-wide plan aligned with the district LCAP. And as we heard, small schools, it will be one and the same. Does everyone at the school own that plan? Have they had input based on data and the self-assessment, self-evaluation, self-reflection that our process encourages? Student-focused. Where do we need to be? How are we going to get there? And so the process supports. Yes, you had a visit last year. Great. Now, how are you doing this year? What's the process? Where are we? What are we going to do next year, and so forth. So that supports the coherence as schools work on all the student needs identified and the supports coming from the state and ESSA. Final couple principles that I think are important that the WASC process helps bring together. Accreditation is not teacher-focused, it's student-focused. It supports, nurtures that total involvement and collaboration of all, with that focus on all students. So as I bring my comments to a close, we have found over the years, with continual refinement and input from all of you as educators in the field, the process supports this cohesive, collaborative process that builds a culture of coherence. And so as we bring this to a close from opening comments, we'd welcome your questions as we look at a student-centered process at all schools and districts. Are there questions that you're seeing, Carrie or Martha, on the screen that we should answer? I see one that I'm going to tackle. Is the WASC School-Wide Action Plan replaced by the district's LCAP? Yes, it's never been a WASC plan. It's always been a school-wide plan aligned now with LCAP. So our process supports one plan at the school that's going to be aligned with the district, and if you're a smaller school, as Carrick said, it will be, the LCAP will be revised and updated based on the in-depth look through the WASC process.
So there is a clarifying question about charter schools and what is their requirement for different committees to provide input into the school plan and the LCAP. As was mentioned before, single school districts and charter schools can use not only the LCAP in place of the school plan, but the LCAP stakeholder process in place of the school plan stakeholder process. So the answer is yes, you can use the LCAP stakeholder plan process in place of the traditional committees that have fed information into the school plan.
And I'd like to add to that, since 1984, WASC and CDE have a partnership and a formal memorandum of understanding. The Focus on Learning book has always been adapted, and over the past 4 years, we've been continually integrated points about aligning with the LCAP. WASC does not have any required action plan format. We're looking for a quality plan that owns by all stakeholders that will guide where the school needs to go. So they choose to use the template from the state, making sure the points are integrated. We will make sure in our process that that is emphasized also.
Carrick, maybe one last question before we turn it over to the next panel. I think this one's maybe a really relevant one for all of the participants. So it mentions if there's any thoughts regarding doing the SPSA planning at the same time as the LCAP planning and taking it to the board in June. From my understanding, the legislation, AB 716, that will go into effect January 1st of 2019, there's no specification about timing, but school districts would be encouraged to, do that alignment and work simultaneously. That's what you choose to do at the local level. Do you have other perspectives?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, that's correct. There is no specific date by which a school plan can be created or needs to be approved by the local board, other than it just has to be done annually. So this is part of local control and how a school district best meets and works with its local schools. I would propose a process that happens at the same time, but school districts and their schools may have a different process that they want to use.
So thank you. If you don't mind waiting for 30 seconds as we transition to the second panel, we'll be right back.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nancy Brownell, and I work for WASC. We have a little smaller panel than we planned. Our colleague from Elk Grove, Sonja, had a family emergency, so we're happy to be here sharing some more specifics about the way local schools and districts are working to build a comprehensive plan that really helps them determine what are their what are the higher priority needs of their students, their dashboard data now, and how do they look towards defining what the actions and services are that are going to really help them move their students towards more success. So I'll let my colleague introduce himself, and then we'll start with a bit of a conversation.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Chris Grado. I'm the principal of Highland High School within the Antelope Valley Union High School District in Palmdale, California. So thank you for having me today.
Good. One of the important dimensions of the goal of the State Board and the Department of Ed, and really WASC over the last few years, is to focus on what we've talked about in the earlier panel about coherence, right? About looking at the connection between data at the district and school level, the capacity really to design the kinds of actions that are going to meet the needs to improve program and to then monitor that progress of implementation. So I think the caveat that's so important in the first steps of the continuous improvement and accountability system that we are in the midst of implementing in our state is that the goal is to organize ourselves at the district and at the school level, often with help from the county office, to really determine how we're going to proceed to meet the needs of students, and through particular events and activities like the WASC self-study process, then a much deeper look is offered at the school site to really go in much more depth about what's working, what's not, and how it might be improved. So I'd like Chris to start by really talking about the alignment concept from a large comprehensive high school and LCAP goals in your district. So how has that evolved in your leadership role?
Absolutely. You know, Marilyn talked about the cycle of quality between WASC, LCAP, and SPSA. Our district has always really looked for the input from all of its leadership as well as all stakeholders. We have various forums. We, as a site leadership team for the district, we get together monthly and then also look at the LCAP about quarterly to give our input. From there, our I guess we kind of call it SPSA, but in our district we call it the SPSA, is aligned directly with our LCAP in that our goals are the exact same. So the goals 1, 2, 3, 4 are the same. How we achieve those goals are a little bit different between the LCAP and our SPSA. And then from there, our action plan and self-study is directly related to our SPSA. So it's kind of, you know, Marilyn called it a cycle of quality. I kind of see it as a continuum kind of going back and forth in that the LCAP goals drive what we're doing, which also drives what our SPSA looks like, which then drives what our action plan looks like, and then kind of moves back the other way. So it's a continual, constant movement back and forth between the three, and we just ensure that when we're looking at our action plan and looking at our areas of improvement, that they're directly aligned with what we're doing, SPSA as well as LCAP-wise, so that our student achievement is what at the forefront of what we're doing at the school site itself.
And remind us the size of your district and the size of your school.
Our district has roughly 25,000 students. My school has just over 2,700 students, and we're a high school district.
So obviously the work that's going on in relationship to the district goals, as Chris mentioned, their school goals are aligned, and I think this is an important distinction in most districts, right? And some of these questions came up, I think, in the earlier session, that while the LCAP goals are really a critical part of the district's goals for moving forward, at individual school sites, the particular actions or services that are being implemented may vary depending on the really high needs of the students in that particular school district, for example, or at the school site. So another question would be, how are you engaging your faculty and other stakeholders in developing, implementing, assessing, refining, that the goal really is, okay, the plan is a first step, getting in and getting work done, really implementing is the key to success.
Right. I mean, our district itself gets a lot of input from stakeholders for the LCAP itself. We have a second contractually negotiated day in our second semester that brings a lot of parents in. It's kind of a back-to-school night model, but they inform the LCAP that way. We have all kinds of forums, back-to-school night, a safety committee meeting, which I actually have tomorrow, which really addresses our LCAP and SPSA goal number 3. We even have a student action committee on campus formed by students. Last year, they actually gave a survey which only reached about 100 students. This year, or 2 years ago, last year we had them redo it and help them a little bit with their questions. They reached about 1,000 students. So, I mean, they're actually informing our SPSA, which even moves on to the LCAP. And then from there, you know, our school site council, our parents who will also look at not only the SPSA, but our WASC action plan as well as any areas of need that we have. So we have all stakeholders are constantly involved in working with that, and we're informing them of how all three of those documents and all three of the things that we're working on towards student achievement all are aligning in that sense.
Well, you touched on this a little bit. How do you help explain to stakeholders, for example, who may be participating both at the district level with LCAP feedback and then also at the site level, how do you help them understand what's the link between our district LCAP and then the specifics of what's happening at Highland?
That's a great question. I think the SPSA is kind of a conduit. I mean, it's kind of in between in terms of it sits in between the action plan as well as the LCAP. Now, with the because the goals are the same and they're aligned exactly the same, except for a few things that get us to those goals, it's easy to explain to parents, starting with the school site council. So our school site council, you know, who of course is made up of all of our stakeholders, starts there, and then we get it on to further on to more parents in the process. But really, if you look at that single plan for student achievement, it really aligns everything between what we're doing, whether if it's with WASC or with the district for student achievement. But the parents, as well as all committees on campus, involving not only our certificated staff but also our classified staff, all have a say in how we get those goals moving forward, especially with you know, we just had a visit last year from WASC in our midterm, so a lot of people are involved in that process. A lot of people give input, and that's kind of how we show, you know, how they're all aligned. And it really starts on our campus with the SPSA.
So you had a mid-cycle visit last year.
Yes. Based
on your prior accreditation findings. Clearly, you've been looking annually at your plan because that information feeds into the district LCAP. So how did that process work for you at your site with WASC and your single plan and feedback to the district and to your community?
Yeah, as a side note and as a bit of an anecdote, I think we were speaking earlier and I said that we kind of had a unconscious competence in that we didn't realize that some of the things were actually aligning already. Whereas once you start to look at it and become a little bit more deliberate with it, you can see that the way we've set it up in our district, that all three kind of work together, it makes it, I don't want to say easier, but it makes it much smoother as you go through the process. We set up committees that if we're looking at our action plan and any critical areas that we had from WASC, you know, our committees on campus will take each of those, we'll align it with the SPSA, which is already aligned with LCAP, and then take the goals out of those critical areas and just align it directly. And then at that point, we can just put resources directly toward, you know, helping achieve those critical areas that just, once again, just equate right to student achievement.
Data obviously plays a huge role, and we now know, obviously, with the implementation of the dashboard information related to both district level, school level, student group level, there's a lot more also happening at the formative assessment level within the context of your departments and what's going on at your school. So can you tell us a little bit about both maybe from how the district supports you in that, but formative and summative data as a way of measuring what's happening with implementation, what the goals are for students? Explore some of that data picture with us.
Absolutely. You know, our LCAP directly is informed also parts of it per the dashboard, which really I think gives a good holistic picture of our students within our district. From a formative perspective at our sites, our district is very good about supporting us with various tools, one of which is called DigiCoach that we use on our cell phones. We can go in as administrators as well as teacher groups, and now we're actually doing it with students, going in and actually looking, which really adds another layer, and it makes it even a lot more fun at that point. But they look at just formative.
Assessment as fun?
Yeah, who would have thought, huh? And so looking at different formative assessments on a daily basis and working with, you know, as a school site and as a district, they're supporting us within our LCAP of using various models like our core instructional model where teachers are assessing on a daily basis, even if it's a exit slip or whatever it is for those types of things. But really, within our LCAP also, a big piece is our district has negotiated 4 student-free professional development days, one of which we had last week, and so our teachers were able to work on a district initiative of writing across the curriculum. But in the second half of the day, we were able to have our teachers on site and work on a common assessment per department, which was also part of our WASC action plan. So again, those all align because once those resources are in the LCAP, then they trickle down to the site level, and it's all connected back to that cycle of quality that was spoken about early in the webinar.
Well, and we also know that your district has done some work on this notion of a graduate profile.
Correct.
Where you've convened groups and really talked about on a little bit larger scale, what is it that we want the students in Antelope Valley to be able to demonstrate as they leave their 12th grade experience? And again, it's connected to a lot of the pieces. Can you talk a little bit about some of the, just the learning that's going on in trying to think about both at the micro level, what's happening in mathematics and English, and what's happening more generally about these learner outcomes that we think are really preparing our students for college and career readiness?
Absolutely. And our goal number 1 for the LCAP is college and career ready. So, I mean, if you take that and step back from it and look at the graduate student profile, what makes that student a college and career ready individual? So we really focus on the 4 C's, creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. And then you can kind of look at, what does the classroom look like that's going to make our students, into those types of individuals. So then you move on to LCAP goal 2, which is 21st century classroom. Well, that's how, you start to do it. And then, it all has to be, under a safe and supportive environment, which is LCAP goal 3. So, it all just kind of cycles through to where, as we look at student achievement and what we want our students to become, it's directly aligned with the LCAP and the SPSA as well as our action plan.
Good. Well, let's see if there are some questions that we might want to try to respond to. We appreciate your thinking. I see the question about DigiCoach. Can you just broadly explain what that software system is?
Sure, and I'm not actually getting any kickbacks from this, but this is just one particular tool. And what it does is that you can go in as a staff and do a quick walkthrough in a classroom where you can actually punch in whatever it is that you want to look at. So, for instance, we'll look at the 4 C's. Are we seeing our students collaborating in classrooms? Are we seeing them communicating with one another? If not, then, maybe as we look at the data after a walkthrough, and we just can spend an hour on a Thursday, say, and walk through second period, then we can get together as administrative staff, as a instructional partner staff, as our teachers in general, and say, we're not seeing this, we're not really seeing a lot of collaborating going on. What can we do differently? And so our instructional partners work with our teachers to say, hey, here's a few strategies that we can use to get our students to collaborate more often. But again, it's just, there are various softwares out there that turn your cell phone basically into a data collection tool, and it is, quite effective.
And has it, what's been the impact? I know it's a relatively new implementation, but from your sense as a principal of a large comprehensive high school, how do you see it as providing you feedback on what's going on, and how has that changed classroom instruction?
Well, it all starts with trust. We have to first show the staff what it is, that we're not using this as a tool that's going to be evaluative. It's strictly for achievement data. And then getting teachers actually in the classrooms. And as I said earlier, we're starting to actually get students to walk through classrooms to look at the same thing. And then you can look at it as a staff and say, okay, these are some of the things. And it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just, there's great instruction going on, and there are maybe a lecture going on that has to take place when within those 5 minutes you're in there, you didn't quite see it. So some of the tool, you have to realize that some of it could be emerging, but it's not quite there yet. But I think that more than anything, it starts the discussion, gets people talking about, back to our student, graduate profile, what do we want our students to be, and is it going to always be achieved through the same type of instruction? And so great conversations come out of that.
I think one of the ways that the implementation and connection of LCAPs and school plans is really the importance of the instructional core, you know, what's happening on the teaching and learning continuum in every classroom every day is what I believe that the intent of good coherent planning is, but that it's really also then getting to the actions that I can take as a classroom teacher in partnership with my department, in partnership with my colleagues and coaches. How has the work that the district has undertaken in really looking much more deeply at instruction helping make a difference for the students in your district?
Oh, it's making a huge difference. As I mentioned earlier, where we have the Student Action Committee, and this was just a group of students that said, we want a little bit more, you know, and so it was an amazing discussion to have because they actually had a survey, and they went in and talked to our teachers at a professional development day. And, you know, we coached them up a little bit on that. We didn't want anybody to feel defensive or that type of thing, but it was a great discussion once again to have. And then once we tell, you know, our district is hugely supportive when we talk about these things that we're doing. So, you know, they'll come in, and one of the ways that we were able to do it with LCFF is what we call mini grants, where our district allows us to write these mini grants to the district to say, you know, we would like to initiate something along these lines, and then we just have to, you know, put it, align it with our LCAP, align it with the SPSA, and then for me, it's a no-brainer if it's aligned with WASC, kind of a slam dunk, so we can turn it in, and we'll get, and of course, NGSS as well, it's another one. So we get a lot of support in that sense through the LCFF. And I know my boss is watching, so when I say slam dunk, I mean that in the best way. So.
Good, yes. One of the questions it looks like that came up is, are your school goals the same as your LCAP goals, and is there another level of detail at the school site as you're trying to implement?
Yeah, they're exactly the same. So our SPSA goals are the exact same as the LCAP goals. However, how we get to those goals are different. So there is a different level of detail. I mean, they, you know, from a district perspective, they're about supporting us to achieve those goals, which in turn are going to achieve the LCAP goals. So, you know, if it's something in particular that we're looking at in terms of, you know, college and career readiness, it could be something along the lines of, you know, implementing something such as our core instructional model and having an outside firm come in to help with that or whatever it is, where, you know, from the LCAP perspective, it might be something along the line of, you know, supporting sites in achieving, you know, LCAP goal 1, whatever it is. So, yeah, we have a different level of detail, but keeping it the exact same makes it just much more seamless in that sense. We do have a 5th goal that we can put in place that aligns directly with WASC. So if we had any critical areas, even though they do still align in terms of our SPSA and the LCAP, if there's something specific that kind of lays outside, we can just, it makes it a lot easier when you take it to your school site council to have approval that'll drive the instruction forward.
So I think there are 9 high schools in
8 comprehensive.
8 comprehensive and the one alternative, a couple of alternatives. So I think your point is well said in that across all of those high schools, and there's some natural coherence by the fact that you're a high school district, you have some goals that are really determined by your LCAP, but that they might look a little different at each of the high schools. Clearly, you also have some feeder districts who send those 9th graders to you. Talk a little bit about how you try to work, because as I recall, you've got 4 or 5 or 6 K-8 districts. How's all that going?
Well, it does make it a little more difficult not being a unified district. However, we have great relationships with all of our feeder districts. In fact, I have a safety committee meeting tomorrow at my school where the principals of 2 of our neighboring middle schools and elementary school are actually coming to the meeting since they're actually in our same neighborhood. But I mean, we have diagnostic assessments that they will actually give their 8th graders before they come to us, so that we know how to place them in math classes and different classes of that sort. So we do have a great, relationship with those districts, but it does just takes work like any other kind of relationship where you have to constantly foster it and make sure that, we're on the same page.
A couple other questions that are coming up about this notion of a WASC action plan and the LCAP and the single plan. The idea is really, and again, I think there's a lot of good work going on across the state. I happen to have visited 6 charter schools in the last month or so related to the results of the Shasta-Anderson court ruling that those charters had to get a new CDS code and go back to an initial accreditation model. And so they have an individual, they're an LEA, so they have their own LCAP. They had written their self-study for initial accreditation based on their LCAP and the criteria, and they've come up with one action plan that is linked to what is their LCAP, and whether they call it the WASC plan or the LCAP or the action plan, that's sort of determined by the individual school site. But the goal is to have a single plan from which to operate and deepen the work at the school site, much like you've described in terms of what's happened in taking the district LCAP. So while there still seem to be several questions about how do all of these plans fit together, the hope is that there's a goal that the school comes out with one plan. If you are a single school district or if you're a charter, that's your LCAP. So the actions that you then might receive, for example, if you're visited at a mid-cycle, you would just fold those additional actions into the one action plan. So again, I think there's still some work that needs to be done in that area across the state, but the hope is there's an alignment of what the district plan is. The schools in the district very often will have the same goals, but just as you well articulated, what a specific school is doing might look a little different than their neighboring school. So I think there are still some questions that we will continue to try to answer after the webinar, but I think at this point I'll turn it back to Barry.
Great. Well, I'd like to first of all thank the panelists for volunteering their time very much. Chris, you were great. Appreciate it. I had an opportunity to visit your school and your district and the awards that you've received recently. So congratulations and thanks for coming to Sacramento.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Marilyn, Martha, and Carrick. We will, as Nancy just mentioned, continue to answer questions. If you wrote in a question, we will get back to you. We will get back to you and try to answer your questions as best we can. Again, within 48 hours, this webinar will be online. You will also get a notice. If you signed up, you will get a notice from us that will tell you exactly where it will be on our website. So don't worry, you'll get a note that will say, click here, and if you want to get it or if you want to send it to somebody to review. So you will be getting that email, and we will be answering the questions. And the last thing I'd like to do as a lifelong educator is to thank all of you for what you do for our kids, for our 6 million plus public school students in the state of California. So thank you for tuning in, and we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.